They called her the Witch because she landed helicopters in places that defied physics. Vietnam, 1970. The war was grinding into its ugliest phase, body counts rising, morale falling, and in the middle of it all, one helicopter pilot was doing things that shouldn't have been possible. Her name was Captain Sarah McKinney. Call sign, Witch 1. She flew a UH-1D Huey, standard medevac bird. Nothing special about the aircraft. But what she could do with it? That was something else entirely. 12 times, she landed in hot zones marked impossible by every other pilot. 12 times, she defied orders, physics, and common sense. And 12 times, she brought everyone home. This is the story of the 13th landing, the one that should have killed her. Sarah McKinney wasn't supposed to be in Vietnam. Women weren't combat pilots in 1970. Army regulations said so. Pentagon policy said so. The Old Boys Club said so. But Sarah had a way of making the impossible look routine. She'd earned her wings in 1967, top of her flight class, better scores than half the male instructors. When the Army needed experienced pilots for medevac operations, they quietly bent the rules. Humanitarian missions only, they said. No combat zones. Sarah smiled and signed the papers. By 1970, she'd flown 340 missions, extracted over 800 wounded soldiers, and earned a reputation that made hardened Marines nervous. She flies like the devil's chasing her, one crew chief said. Or like she made a deal with him, another added. The nickname started as an insult. The Witch, whispered by pilots who didn't like being shown up by a woman. But Sarah wore it like armor. Call me whatever you want, she said. Just don't ask me to leave wounded men behind. Her first impossible landing was at Firebase Ripcord. July 1970, LZ was too small, surrounded by mountains, under heavy mortar fire. Every pilot who tried it turned back. Sarah went in anyway. She hovered the Huey between two mountain peaks, rotor tips 6 feet from the rocks on both sides, dropped straight down into the Firebase courtyard, loaded 4 wounded, and pulled out before anyone could even process what they'd seen. Command wanted to court-martial her. The soldiers she saved wanted to give her a medal. The nickname stuck, and the legend grew, landing 2. Firebase Kate, LZ blocked by crashed helicopter. Sarah landed on top of the wreckage, balanced the Huey on twisted metal while wounded scrambled aboard. Landing 3, Highway 9, convoy ambushed, no LZ at all. Sarah hovered 5 feet off the ground for 8 minutes while infantry carried wounded to the chopper. Enemy fire the entire time, never touched down, just hovered, landing. 4, Laotian border, secret CIA base, surrounded. Only way in was through a narrow canyon with 200-foot walls. Sarah flew through it at 100 knots, wingtips 3 feet from rock on both sides. She threaded the needle, the CIA station chief said. I didn't think it was physically possible. Landing 5. Night extraction, no moon, visibility 0, radio dead. Sarah navigated by listening to the wounded soldier's gunfire and landed within 10 feet of his position, in total darkness. Landing 6, Mekong Delta, monsoon season, wind shear so bad it flipped 3 helicopters that day. Sarah went in anyway, fought crosswinds that would have torn apart most aircraft, brought out 12 wounded. Landing 7, Ashau Valley, triple canopy jungle, no clearing. Sarah hovered above the trees. Crew chief lowered the jungle penetrator through the canopy, held position for 20 minutes while wounded were winched up one by one. Landing 8, Khe San, during a ground assault, mortar rounds falling like rain. Sarah landed, loaded wounded, took off. A mortar hit exactly where her skids had been 3 seconds earlier. Luck, some said. Timing, others said. Sarah didn't comment. Landing 9, DMZ, both engines hit by small arms fire. One engine quit. Sarah flew 15 miles on one engine, landed at a firebase, unloaded wounded, took off again before the second engine died. Landing 10, Mekong River. Wounded soldier trapped on small sandbar. Water on all sides. No solid ground. Sarah balanced the Huey with one skid on the sandbar, other skid in the river. Held it there for 6 minutes. The rotor wash was creating waves, her co-pilot said, and she was compensating for them in real time. I've never seen anything like it. Landing 11, fuel gauge showing empty, 30 miles from base, wounded critical. Sarah shut down every non-essential system, flew at minimum power, glided the last 5 miles, and landed at the Firebase hospital with 0 fuel remaining. The engine quit the second we touched down, her crew chief said. Not a second before. Landing 12, Firebase Illingworth, March 1970. Under heavy attack. NVA overrunning the perimeter. Every helicopter that tried to land got shot down. Sarah made 3 trips, evacuated 42 wounded. Last trip, her Huey took 17 bullet hits. She landed safely. The Huey was retired the next day. Too damaged to fly again. Sarah requested a new bird. Command gave her one. Because even if they didn't like how she did things, they couldn't argue with results. What nobody knew was that Landing 13 was coming, and it would be different from all the others. October 15, 1970. Shore 30 hours. Sarah was asleep in her tent when the radio call came. Which one? We need you for an emergency extraction. Sarah was awake instantly. Copy, what's the situation? Firebase Zulu under heavy attack. 3 wounded critical, bleeding out. They need medevac now. Sarah was already pulling on her flight suit. What's the LZ status? A pause. There is no LZ. Sarah stopped. Say again? Firebase Zulu is on top of a mountain. Only flat ground is the firebase itself, but it's under mortar attack. Every landing pad is cratered, and the firebase is surrounded. We've lost 2 choppers trying to get in. How long do the wounded have? Another pause. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Sarah grabbed her helmet. I'm wheels up in 5. Which one? Command is recommending you abort. LZ is too dangerous. Command can recommend whatever they want, Sarah said. I'm going. She ran to the flight line. Her crew chief, Sergeant Mike Torres, was already pre-flight checking the Huey. You heard? Sarah asked. Yeah, Mike said. And I'm telling you right now, this one's different, Captain. 2 birds already went down. 1 crew didn't make it out. Then we better not make the same mistakes they did. Sarah climbed into the pilot's seat. Her co-pilot, Warrant Officer Jeff Carson, was strapping in. You sure about this? Jeff asked. No, Sarah said honestly. But those men don't have time for me to be sure. She started the engines. The Huey's turbines whined to life. Which one to tower, requesting immediate takeoff clearance. Which one? You are cleared. And Captain, good luck. Sarah pulled collective. The Huey lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, heading toward Firebase Zulu, heading toward the impossible. 30 minutes later, Sarah saw it. Firebase Zulu sat on a mountain peak like a concrete crown. Barbed wire, sandbags, mortar pits, and fire. Lots of fire. Explosions rippled across the firebase. Mortars, rockets, tracer fire lit up the darkness like deadly fireflies. Oh my God, Jeff whispered. Sarah keyed the radio. Zulu Actual, this is which one? I'm 2 clicks out. What's your situation? A strained voice came back. Which one? Zulu Actual. We are taking heavy indirect fire. All landing pads are compromised. North pad is cratered. South pad is on fire. East pad has a downed chopper blocking it. What about West pad? West pad is intact but exposed. Direct line of sight to enemy positions. You'll be a sitting duck. Sarah circled the firebase, studied the layout, the terrain. Jeff was right. This was different. Every other impossible landing had been about skill, timing, precision. This one was about something else. Zulu actual, I'm coming in on the west pad. Pop smoke when you hear my rotors. Which one? Negative. I'm telling you that pad is... I know what it is, Sarah said. Pop smoke. She started her descent. Mike leaned forward from the crew compartment. Captain, what's the plan? The plan is we land, load wounded, and get out before they kill us. That's not a plan. That's hope. Sometimes hope is all you've got. The Huey dropped toward the firebase. Sarah's hands were steady on the controls, eyes scanning, mind calculating, wind speed, rotor clearance, approach angle, escape route. She saw the purple smoke grenade pop on the west pad. I have purple smoke, Sarah confirmed. Roger, which one? That's us, but we're taking fire on that. An explosion cut off the transmission. Sarah gritted her teeth and kept descending. Tracer fire arced toward them. Green tracers, enemy fire. Taking fire, Jeff called. I see it. Sarah jinked left. The tracers missed. She corrected, kept descending. The firebase was 100 feet below. 75, 50. More tracers. Closer this time. Something pinged off the Huey's tail boom. We're hit, Mike yelled. How bad? Don't know. We're still flying. 25 feet, 20, 15. The west pad was small, barely big enough for the Huey's skids, and it was right on the edge of the mountain. One side, solid ground. Other side, 1,000-foot drop. Sarah flared, dropped collective. The Huey settled onto the pad. Right skid on solid ground. Left skid hanging over the abyss. The whole aircraft tilted at a 15-degree angle. Are you kidding me? Jeff yelled. Hold her steady, Sarah said. She couldn't risk shutting down. Couldn't risk full weight on the skids. She kept power on, rotors spinning, using the engine to balance the uneven load. Mike, get those wounded aboard, now! Mike jumped out. Infantry were already running with stretchers. 3 wounded. Critical condition. Mortar rounds impacted 30 yards away. Shrapnel pinged off the Huey. Sarah fought the controls. Every gust of wind threatened to push them over the edge. 1 wounded loaded. 2. An RPG streaked past the nose, missed by 10 feet. Hurry, Sarah yelled. 3rd wounded loaded. We're good, Mike screamed. Go, go, go! Sarah pulled collective. The Huey lifted. That's when the tail rotor took a hit. The impact was like getting punched. The Huey yawed violently to the right. Sarah's hands flew across the controls, fighting, correcting. Tail rotor damaged, Jeff shouted. We're losing anti-torque! Without a functional tail rotor, the Huey would spin, uncontrollable, deadly. Sarah kicked left pedal, hard, compensated with cyclic. The aircraft steadied, barely. Can you fly it? Jeff asked. I'm about to find out. She nursed the Huey away from the firebase. Every control input had to be perfect. Too much, they'd spin. Too little, they'd fall. It was like balancing on a knife's edge, while someone shot at you in a hurricane. How far to the nearest hospital? Sarah asked. Jeff checked the map. 15 miles. But Captain, we're not going to make it 15 miles like this. We don't have a choice. The Huey limped through the sky. Altitude, 500 feet. Airspeed, 60 knots. Maximum they could manage without losing control. Behind them, Firebase Zulu was still burning. In the cabin, Mike was working on the wounded. blood everywhere. He looked up at Sarah. These guys need a hospital now. Not in 15 minutes. Now. Sarah's jaw tightened. 15 miles. 15 minutes. 3 men would die in 15 minutes. Unless she did something crazy. Jeff, Sarah said quietly. Remember landing 5? Jeff looked at her. The night extraction? No visibility? You navigated by sound? Yeah. What about it? How fast were we going? I don't know. Maybe 40 knots. Why? Because I have an idea. I don't like your ideas. You never do. Sarah pushed the cyclic forward. The Huey's nose dipped. Airspeed increased. 70 knots. 80. 90. The tail rotor damage made the aircraft vibrate like it was tearing itself apart. Sarah, we can't sustain this speed, Jeff yelled. I know. Then what are you… There. She pointed at a clearing ahead. Not a firebase, not a hospital. Just an open patch of ground with 3 tents. A forward aid station. Medics, supplies, surgery capability. It wasn't supposed to handle helicopters. Too small, too rough, but it was 2 miles away. 2 minutes. Can they save those guys? Sarah asked. Mike looked out, saw the aid station. Yeah, if we can get them there. Hold on. Sarah dove. The Huey screamed downward. 100 knots. 110. Every gauge redlined. Every warning light flashing. The damaged tail rotor screamed in protest. We're going to shake apart, Jeff yelled. Not yet, we're not. Sarah pulled back on the cyclic. The Huey flared. G-forces crushed them into their seats. They dropped toward the aid station clearing. Too fast. Way too fast. You're not going to make it, Jeff screamed. Sarah didn't answer. Hands moving, feet dancing on the pedals, fighting a dying aircraft. She cut power at the last second. Let the Huey drop. They hit the ground hard. The skids buckled, the tail boom cracked, but they were down. The Huey didn't explode, didn't roll, just settled into the dirt with a final groan of tortured metal. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Mike threw open the door. Medics! Medics! We need help! Army medics came running. Stretchers, IV bags. They pulled the wounded out. Sarah sat in the pilot's seat, hands still on the controls, still shaking. Jeff looked at her. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. Did it work? Yeah, it worked. Sarah exhaled, let go of the controls, unbuckled her harness. She climbed out of the Huey, stood next to it. The tail boom was cracked nearly in half. The tail rotor was destroyed. The skids were bent. The main rotor blades had stress fractures. The Huey would never fly again. Mike walked over. Captain, those guys are going to make it. Medics said you got them here just in time. Sarah nodded, didn't trust herself to speak. Also, Mike added, Command wants to talk to you. I bet they do. The inquiry lasted 3 days. Sarah sat across from a panel of senior officers, generals, colonels, people who'd never flown a combat mission, but had opinions about how they should be flown. Captain McKinney, the lead officer, said, You disobeyed direct orders. You endangered your crew. You destroyed a valuable aircraft. Do you have anything to say? Sarah met his eyes. 3 men are alive, sir. That's what I have to say. That's not the point. With respect, sir, that's exactly the point. The room went silent. Another officer leaned forward. Captain, you've made 13 impossible landings. Every one of them violates standard procedure. Every one of them should have killed you. When does it stop? Sarah thought about that. Thought about the soldiers she'd saved, the crews she'd flown with, the aircraft she'd pushed past their limits. It stops when there's no one left to save, she said quietly. The lead officer studied her. Then he sighed. "Captain McKinney, you're grounded. Effective immediately. No more combat missions, no more medevac operations. You're being transferred to a training position stateside." Sarah felt something break inside her chest, but she kept her face neutral. "Understood, sir." However, the officer continued, "You're also being awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement in aerial flight, 13 times over." He slid a folder across the table. "Your flight record is being sent to the Pentagon. They're considering you for additional recognition, possibly the Silver Star." Sarah looked at the folder, didn't open it. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted. I don't want medals, I want to fly." "I know," the officer said, not unkindly. "But sometimes we don't get what we want. Sometimes we get what we earned." The hearing ended. Sarah was dismissed. She walked out of the building into the Vietnamese sun. Her flight suit felt heavy. Her wings felt meaningless. Mike was waiting outside. "So? I'm grounded." "Damn." They stood in silence for a moment. "You know what they're calling you now?" Mike asked. "I don't care." "The witch who landed 13 times in hell and walked away from all of them." Sarah almost smiled. "Walked away, got grounded. Same thing, right?" "Not even close." Sarah McKinney returned to the United States in December 1970. She spent the next 3 years training new pilots, teaching them the basics, the rules, the procedures, the things she'd spent her entire combat career ignoring. It was torture. In 1973, she resigned her commission, left the Army, went to work for a civilian helicopter company, flew oil rig supply runs in the Gulf of Mexico. Boring, safe, nothing like Vietnam. But every year, on October 15th, she got letters. From the men she'd saved, from the crews she'd flown with, from soldiers she'd never met who'd heard the stories. "You saved my life. You gave me a future. You're the reason I got to meet my daughter." In 1985, she received a different kind of letter. From the Army. They wanted to fly her back to Vietnam, memorial dedication, a plaque at Firebase Zulu honoring the helicopter crews who died there. Sarah almost said no, but something made her say yes. November 1985, 15 years later. Sarah stood at Firebase Zulu, or what was left of it. The concrete was crumbling. The barbed wire was rusted. The firebase had been abandoned years ago, but the west pad was still there. The place where she'd balanced a Huey on the edge of a cliff. She walked to the edge, looked down at the 1,000-foot drop. "How did I do that?" she whispered. "You tell me." She turned. An older Vietnamese man stood behind her. Civilian clothes, kind face. "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "Do I know you?" "No," the man said. "But I know you. You are the helicopter woman, the witch." Sarah tensed. "How do you—" "I was here," the man said. "That night, October 1970, I was NVA. We were attacking this base." Sarah's hand instinctively went to where her sidearm used to be. But this wasn't a war zone anymore. "I was the one shooting," the man continued, "trying to hit your helicopter." "You nearly did." "I know, but something stopped me." He looked at her. "You came back. Even when they said no. Even when it was impossible. You came back for your wounded." He paused. "We were told Americans did not value life, that they would leave their soldiers behind. But you—" He shook his head. "You proved them wrong." "I was just doing my job," Sarah said. "No," the man said firmly. "You were doing something else. Something we respected, even as enemies." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small object, held it out. A bullet. 7.62 Metons, AK-47 round. "This was my last bullet that night," he said. "I aimed at your tail rotor. I had a clear shot, but I did not fire." Sarah stared at him. "Why?" "Because you were brave, and bravery deserves to survive, even in war." He pressed the bullet into her hand, closed her fingers around it. "Keep it," he said. "Remember that even enemies can respect courage." He turned and walked away. Sarah stood on the edge of Firebase Zulu, holding a bullet that was never fired. She looked down at the west pad, at the ground where she'd saved 3 lives, and she smiled. Sarah McKinney passed away in 2019, 83 years old. Heart failure. At her funeral, over 200 people attended. Soldiers she'd saved, pilots she'd trained, families she'd given back their sons and husbands. They stood in the rain and told stories about the 13 impossible landings, about the woman who refused to accept no, about the witch who conquered physics with nothing but skill and stubbornness. On her headstone, they inscribed one line: "She flew where angels feared to land and brought heroes home." And in a small museum in Vietnam, there's a plaque at Firebase Zulu. It tells the story of the helicopter pilot who landed on the edge of a cliff, who saved 3 lives that shouldn't have been savable, who proved that sometimes the impossible is just a dare waiting to be accepted. They still call her the witch, but now it means something different. It means legend. If this story moved you, if it made you think about courage, determination, and refusing to accept the impossible, hit that like button. These stories deserve to be told. These pilots deserve to be remembered. Subscribe for more untold stories from Vietnam, the helicopters, the pilots, the missions no one talks about.